Hi, everyone. Welcome to this AI Safety, Ethics, and Society conversation. This is Jessica Minginelli, Operational Excellence Leader. I help organizations become more effective, reduce labor costs, improve productivity, and their full margins. So I do this by redesigning processes, digitalizing processes, and introducing automation, and increasingly AI-led automation. But as AI systems become more capable, the questions we are facing today go beyond efficiency. They reshape work, they impact jobs, and in the long term, the economic reality. So today, I'm stepping outside the enterprise lens to explore the broader ramifications of AI systems. And I'm doing so with a special guest, Sam Manning, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for the Governance of AI, or GovAI for short, a non-resident fellow at the Foundation for American Innovation. So Sam's work focuses on measuring the economic and labor market impacts of AI systems and on designing policy options to help ensure that advanced AI will foster widespread economic prosperity. Hi, Sam. That's a hell of a mission.
Hi. Um, yeah. Yeah, I guess so. It's pretty big picture. Yeah.
Pretty big picture. Thank you, Sam. Listen, Sam, you've worked across academic research, policy, and global AI governance for a few years now. So what pulled you in personally into studying the impact of AI on labor markets?
Yep. So my background's in development economics, so trying to understand what works and what's most cost effective in terms of policies and programs that can reduce poverty and improve global health outcomes. And as I was kind of working in that field in the from 2015 to 2020 or so, it was super fun and intellectually stimulating, and got to work on some great projects. But it also seemed like there was this like big technological change that was coming that was going to affect all these sort of outcomes that I cared about. And so I thought, if I could channel some of my research prioritization and kind of focus area towards shaping and understanding like AI's impact on economic growth and employment and inequality and wages and these types of things, then that might allow me to have a bit more of an impact relative to focusing on kind of like narrow policy and program evaluations in different contexts. And so that led me to getting started working in this space. Trying to get a better hold on how the kind of technical ambitions of some of the big AGI companies, if they were sort of realized or anything close to them was realized, how that might actually impact economic outcomes and livelihoods.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in the public debate, there's a lot of uncertainty, and some of the
Mm,
narratives are very polarized. So it goes from AI will boost everyone, or even AI is a bubble and it will burst soon. And then on the other extreme, we hear catastrophic narratives of mass job displacement. And so what I found really striking about your research, it tries to move the conversation from speculating about the capabilities of the systems, what they will be able to do, to actually measuring the economic reality. And so understanding the implications on the labor markets.
mhm.
So what I see from your research is that the reality might be a lot more nuanced than these extremes. Can you tell us why?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that we shouldn't kind of underplay the potential transformative economic impacts that could come from autonomous AI systems that can kind of outperform humans at any tasks that we can imagine, and the potential for much more kind of compute and energy abundance that allows these systems to kind of run doing economically valuable work. But I think that en route to getting there, to that potential longer term future, there's going to be much more complex and sort of hard to predict and nuanced
Mm,
changes that happen in the labor market, where the policy challenge is not one of ensuring is not only one of ensuring sort of material well-being in a world where there's no more work, but it's one of kind of making sure that workers are resilient and adaptive to changing demands for what's valued in a labor market, what other people value in terms of work. And I expect that skill demands and the kind of composition of different jobs that make up the economy is probably going to change quite a lot, maybe at an accelerated pace over the next, decade or so, but that there'll still be plenty of jobs, even if we have really incredible, AI progress over that period. And I think these sort of adjustments can be quite costly for workers, costly for individuals to manage, and for a number of reasons, right? People have these built-up worker identities that are hard to shift off of. They have aspirations that of kind of who they are and what their kind of role is in the workforce, and their identity tied to their work. That if that's disrupted, it can cause kind of these adjustment frictions. And I can say more about how I see that going, but
Yeah, there was one thing I wanted to touch on, which is in your GPT's work, there's two papers. GPTs are GPTs 23 and 24. So these papers frame AI as a general purpose technology, so GPT, rather than a simple automation tool. And so for our listeners that may not live in the economics literature every day, why is this distinction so important for how we think about how AI will impact jobs?
Yeah, so I think general purpose technologies in the economics literature are characterized by a few different things, a few different characteristics. So one is kind of their pervasiveness across the economy. So are they broadly applicable to a wide range of economic activity? Two is are they improving over time? So are they getting better, and kind of expanding what they're useful at over time? And then the third characteristic is, are they able to spawn kind of new innovations and new technologies and things like this? You can think of electricity as like the stereotypical example here. And I think it's important to understand that, large language models, like we were studying in the GPT's paper, have these characteristics, mostly because it allows you to think about predicting the future with them with a bit more humility than you might if you are thinking about them as kind of more narrow tools for labor automation. So, for example, if it were the case that you were at a similar point in the development of kind of electricity, and you tried to kind of make some sort of prediction about the jobs that were going to be taken away and the jobs that were going to be created because of electricity, I think you would have probably never predicted, refrigerator repairman or something that didn't come around for like many. That's just like one example, but there's the point being that there's like so many different unpredictable ways that the general purpose technologies can kind of spawn new innovations and new technologies that otherwise might not have been made possible. Same is true for the internet. I mean, LLMs were made possible in large part because of the internet. And I don't necessarily know if that was fully internalized like as the internet was coming about. And so basically it's useful to distinguish these two, because a tool for automating a specific job or set of tasks, you're maybe able to make much more concrete predictions about the economic effects that might have. Whereas a general purpose technology, I think we have to understand that part of the benefit of it is that it's going to create all these kind of unpredictable innovations that hopefully are driven by what's useful.
I mean, one of the things that we hear in the public debate is that the optimists in particular say that AI will create new jobs, and so we shouldn't worry, just like some past technologies did, and you just confirmed that.
Mhm.
Even in my line of business, when we introduce automation, it's never framed as let's cut jobs, but it's always
Mhm.
framed around let's free up capacity for our people to focus on higher value and more
Mhm.
meaningful work.
Mhm.
Now, a question I have is, where do these historical analogies still hold true based on your research, and where do they break down? Is it all then, oh, we'll have new jobs and we shouldn't worry?
Well, I do think that in the like right now, humans are a very important part of production processes that involve AI and are a bottleneck in getting stuff done, even though these systems are increasingly capable and able to do more useful kind of sets of tasks that can complement, what workers are doing. Um, I think it's my Yeah, I think it's clearly true in my mind that AI already has created lots of new jobs. I guess my job wouldn't exist without AI, in its kind of current form. There's, and I think like, yeah, there's been lots of job creation. There still will be lots of job creation that's directly sparked, by AI advances. Like, for example, um, needing more human expertise on kind of AI agent security issues and things like this, or AI governance researchers or whatever it might be. And those are kind of directly like a product of AI progress. And then there's going to be many other jobs that are created that are kind of very far downstream from the fact that AI is driving more productivity in the economy, and therefore um, helping to make people richer and therefore increase demand for lots of different services,
Right.
new and old, across the economy. And this sort of growth that comes from productivity gains from AI, it creates new work. One thing that makes the prospect of AGI type systems potentially different from past GPTs and past labor saving technology is that the ultimate kind of technological ambition is to create systems that can actually just outperform humans
Yeah.
at everything for cheaper. That's a crazy ambition and might not actually be possible. It might not ever come true, but uh the prospect of that, where kind of that might threaten human comparative advantage in much more significant ways, is the thing that makes people concerned about longer term, employment impacts. Um, feel
Yeah.
differently about AI progress relative to past technologies.
Yeah, so there's one thing that I got from your research, now that we're seeing more and more the rise of AI agents,
Mhm.
and for those who are listening, AI agents are systems that can perform long sequences of tasks with a certain degree of autonomy, so with very minimal human oversight. And even in my work at Salesforce, that's exactly what we were implementing, AI agents with the explicit goal of significantly reducing the need for human intervention. What your research suggests is that this new rise of AI agents may shift economic returns from labor, so from workers, toward capital owners.
Um,
So, how real is this risk?
yeah, I think this is actually something I have a good amount of uncertainty about. So it definitely seems plausible, and it's a thing that people worry about quite a bit. If you have non-human systems doing lots of uh, valuable work to the point where they are um, potentially displacing human laborers, and then causing them to make job transitions sort of down the income ladder, um, in a labor market, but growth is accelerating due to kind of the usefulness of these software tools. Then this automation, yeah, could make it the case that um, kind of humans uh, who own some share of these AGI companies, or the various kind of companies in the compute supply chain, might just see relatively larger returns than over time than the share of kind of total income that goes to workers. But the capital labor share has been relatively constant
Okay.
over the course of history, and I think it's TBD the extent to which this AI actually shifts this. So I think this is like something that should be monitored over time.
Okay.
There's ideas, because I think people can also disagree about the extent to which it's actually super meaningful. Like if it's the case that real incomes are rising across the board for human beings because AI has allowed many goods and services to become much cheaper,
Mhm.
but the capital labor share, therefore kind of poverty is being reduced across the board, but the kind of capital labor share is more skewed towards kind of investments and capital owners. Then I guess there's a question about exactly how big a deal that is. You'd imagine that
Correct.
beyond some point of concentration, then it might breed this sort of like increased inequality might have other societal and political spillovers that maybe you might want to
Mhm.
mitigate through different redistributive policy or things like this. And so having us but yeah, I guess I don't think there's like a clear consensus about exactly
Okay.
what the right threshold is for that. And so I think, yeah, kind of having ways to sort of monitor trends in this, and then saying, well, maybe it's the case that some predefined threshold uh, either a Gini coefficient or the capital labor share exceeding, say, 80%. Or something maybe would incentivize some sort of shift towards a broader like redistributive
Mhm.
policy or a progressive capital taxation or something.
Absolutely. So it sounds really your research is trying to monitor and measure all different possible outcomes and keep an eye on how the situation's going. Have you noticed in the years that you've worked on this any evolution that it would make you more worried about anything in particular and
Yeah,
saying, well, I would like to watch this more closely?
yeah, great question. So one thing that's come up is I think this year, over the past 6 months or so, we've gotten some empirical signals that um, the demand for junior entry more entry level kind of white
Mhm.
collar workers has declined um, relatively faster than it has for than for kind of older workers in the same occupations, where demand for older workers, more experienced workers in these white collar, highly exposed
Yeah.
AI exposed occupations has kind of held steady or increased. And we've seen declines in employment in demand for work, like junior workers in these roles. And this is like a relatively new thing that I think um, somewhat intuitive in some ways if you think that AI is most helpful for replacing kind of and automating sort of
Repetitive.
more entry level type of white collar.
Repetitive. Yeah.
Yep. But but I do think it kind of presents like new questions and challenges about, well, what should kind of people who are going to university
Yes.
be expecting out of to get out of their sort of investments in skill building and training, and what should how much is it going to be the case that younger workers kind of expectations are going to be challenged as they either enter the labor market or as they um, kind of navigate it at the beginning of their careers. And these are really big
Yeah.
questions that I think is much it's very much worth like governments and the private sector kind of working together to build the infrastructure out to better sort of track and get visibility into over time.
I think it's a great challenge for enterprises as well, right? Because we're saying it skews to our older workers. These older workers at some point will exit the workforce and
Mhm.
new ones will have to enter the workforce. So it poses a challenge for organization. How do you actually train your new entry level if those jobs aren't there anymore? So that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you. So this is incredibly insightful. And again, I think I'm very data driven in what I do. And so I love the data driven approach. And I'd like to shift a little bit now from impact to response, because the other aspect of your work is proposing policy to ensure that there's more widespread prosperity out of AI. And what I see coming through your work is that we can't govern AI-driven labor changes through static roles. So I really see this need for adaptive, data-driven governance frameworks so that they can evolve as AI systems evolve and as labor markets evolve. There was one particular forward-looking argument you made in your recent work for the Foundation for American Innovation. I think it's from December 2025, that one of the biggest opportunities is untapped data. And you speak particularly for public-private partnerships, not just with AI developers, but also with payroll providers and hiring platforms. So I'd love for you to kind of tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for your interest in this. So if you want to get a hold on empirically what's going on with AI's impacts on the demand for different types of labor, and outcomes like employment, wages, the rate of job transitions, these types of things, then you need two things. You need data on AI usage and adoption, and you need economic data on these indicators that you care about. A year or so ago, we were basically totally in the dark on the AI usage and adoption side of things. It was kind of, we had these sort of proxy measures of exposure that came out of the GPT's paper, for example, but it was unclear how valid these were. And now we have much more data on AI usage across the economy from surveys and from the model developers like Anthropic, who are releasing data on AI usage kind of tied to different worker tasks, across the economy. However, we still have a lot of blind spots there. Anthropic's the only company that's kind of regularly reporting these usage statistics kind of linked to job tasks. And that presents a bit of a visibility challenge. It's really great, but it means, we know, for example, that using Claude is heavily skewed towards coding and software development type of work, whereas we know that ChatGPT use has kind of a much more diverse sort of set of use cases that people use it for in their work and otherwise. And the same is true for kind of Microsoft Copilot applications. These have kind of a different set of use cases as well. And I think it would be wonderful. I think I talk about in that piece is kind of if there were to be some sort of reporting standard, a standardized set of a standardized kind of approach to reporting some of the usage statistics across the industry, whether that be from model developers or also from cloud providers that are kind of serving the models via API to enterprise customers, then this could present a more holistic picture of how AI systems are being used for different tasks across the economy. That's one piece. Be great if we could get that. Then the other thing is, well, the economic data that we have is useful to an extent. We have, surveys like the current population survey in the US that gathers data on employment trends, for example. And we have a number of other surveys doing, collecting on economic indicators like job transitions and wages. It's often the case, however, though, that these data sets are either too small in their sample size to be able to look at trends you might really care about, like, for example, the difference between junior workers in a job and older workers in a job. Also not necessarily granular enough on the outcomes that they're collecting in terms of self-reporting of wages and things like this, rather than kind of more administrative data that you can get directly from private sector sources like payroll providers, ADP, and others. And so the idea here would be the policy idea and kind of that piece, sorry to be so long-winded about it, is that you would get you would leverage the fact that a lot of this available data already exists in the private sector. If you can build kind of data licensing agreements with payroll providers and hiring platforms like LinkedIn and Indeed, for example, then you can get a much larger sample of more granular, closer to real-time data on these economic trends that you care about than what is currently available from government surveys. And you don't necessarily need to then use as much kind of like taxpayer dollars to expand upon large kind of survey infrastructure that usually takes on the order of multiple years and millions of dollars.
Wow.
And the goal would be to link these two sources together, right? You link the adoption data from the companies with private sector data on hiring, demand, and employment and things, and we can then empirically chart out the differences, the changes over time in the relationship between adoption in a given sector or job and the economic outcomes that policymakers might care about. And if we can do that, it gives us better visibility into where impacts are actually happening and where opportunities are, for training and workforce development, for example. If we see hiring demand in particular areas, if we see hiring demand in particular parts of the labor market that is going unmet, but could be quite helpful in critical industries like healthcare or in data security and these types of things, then it maybe is suggestive of opportunities to that are kind of untapped to try to take advantage of and even boost some of the economic benefits of this technology. So and also on the other end gives you a sense of where disruptions might be taking place, where rethinking different types of worker adjustment assistance programs and things to manage job transitions could be helpful.
Absolutely. So it would give a more realistic picture of what's really happening if we had access to this type of data. Listen, is there anything about your research that I haven't asked you, but you would have wanted me to ask you?
Honestly, I'm most excited about that last thread that we talked about.
Okay.
So I think the data stuff is quite important. I guess the only other thing, I guess maybe just talking about plausible. Maybe I mentioned this a little bit, but like my view is, in terms of the discourse around AI's impacts now, is that over the next decade or so, a lot of the kind of views that the rise to the surface are things like, well, we might face really transformative sort of like technological unemployment like scenarios, or this is going to be kind of a pretty normal technology that doesn't necessarily cause all that much disruption or all that much growth. And I think I have a view that's sort of in the middle that, I am interested in sort of articulating a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell us why you're a little bit more in the middle, because I think it's kind of like that's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
Are we all going to lose our jobs, or is it all going to be, fun and games? And you're like, it's a bit more in the middle. Tell us.
I think that's right. Yeah. So I think I see the challenge. I think I see lots of available jobs, still being the case, a decade or so from now, even if we have lots of AI progress, but this core challenge being that they're going to look probably much different or hard to predict than we might anticipate. And so the making workers resilient, being able to facilitate job transitions, better job matching, ensuring that workers kind of have access to AI systems that allow them to be more productive, allow them to expand their capability sets in their current jobs, but then also in jobs of the future, seems like quite important to me as like a policy goal. And I do think that I'd be surprised if there's not a meaningful contribution of AI to productivity and growth across the economy, not on the order of 10% additional points on economic growth in a given year or something like that. But I think it's plausible that you get another 1, 2, 3 percentage points, a decade out from now in terms of economic growth, which would have massive implications. That would mean doubling over the baseline rate of economic growth in the US, for example, and would have huge implications for questions around national debt, and things like, and things like this. And so I think even in these scenarios that when you say the numbers out loud, it sounds maybe that it's not that big a deal. Like, what's another percentage point or two of growth? They're actually pretty transformative, over time, if that sort of economic impact were to kind of hold steady and sort of, compound over several years.
Wow, and it totally makes sense when you're talking about reshaping even what it means, what kind of scales. It makes sense to me even in the enterprise world. In my line of business, oftentimes we talk about the fact that we will need hybrid workforces in the future, but no one is actually telling us what that will entail on the ground.
Yeah.
How do you actually do that? So there's new skills that are needed. So thank you for confirming that through your research. So let's really get down to the end of our conversation. If our listeners, and this could be anyone, general population, policymakers, governments, but if they could take one core idea from your research today, what should that be?
Probably that AI is going to be a pretty big deal for labor markets and for the economy, but that these impacts are not entirely predictable. And investing in sort of being adaptable, understanding when you can use these systems, when to rely on them, when they're unreliable, and kind of experimenting is, a thing that I think is a healthy recommendation for kind of anybody trying to navigate a future labor market and a future economy, or if you're trying to figure out how do I make policy, trying to figure out where these systems are useful, and experimenting with them is kind of a leaning into the fact that this is going to undergird lots of economic activity might be a somewhat useful takeaway.
Right. And I found this conversation very optimistic, and there's a lot of optimistic coming through from you who are looking into this in detail. So it makes me a lot more optimistic about the future of work in the age of AI. And so for those who want to follow Sam's work, you can find Sam at sam-manning.com or sam-manning.com, as well at governance.ai. And Sam, thank you so much for your thoughtful and grounding conversation today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jessica.